Joshua chapter 7. Our sermon today is about Achan and about how he was, he kind of did the people of Israel wrong. So, those of you who get the reference in the sermon title of Achan breaking hearts, just realize y'all have no idea how much of this Ann puts up with and helps me edit before y'all hear it. All right. But we need to talk about this. We need to talk about who Achan was and why this matters. And so as we look at the context, and then we'll come to the text, realize that in Joshua we have won the Battle of Jericho. I decided that most of y'all have probably heard the Battle of Jericho enough times that we could just briefly touch on it. The people of Israel, we brought them last week across the river Jordan. Last Sunday night we dealt with their initial point into the promised land, the circumcision, the fact that they began to participate, they began to eat off the food of the land, and so God stopped the manna because they were provided for with being in the promised land. And then they come to Jericho. Jericho has the big wall, like most walled cities did back then. In fact, you couldn't be a walled city without a wall. Just about every city had one. That's the difference historically. In that time frame, when you go to digging this stuff up out of the ground, the difference between a city and a village is a wall. You would think that the difference between a city and a village was people, but it's not. It's the fact that the cities had walls, and that people would be able to they'd be able to flee into the city. It became a defensive strong point. Also, something to take note of: the person in charge of a city is referred to as a king. We tend to think of kings as having big kingdoms. Lots of people, the King of England. Well, they've got a queen right now. But, the Queen of England, the King of England, the King of this, the King of that. But the title, there's not a difference in the terminology that gets used for the king of a nation, King Nebuchadnezzar, and the ruler of a city. So we traditionally translate that as king all the way through, but then, he only had 10,000 people. He wasn't much of a king. He's really more of a prince. Well, so what? But he's still a king. All right, so we're after Jericho at this point as we come to Achan. Now, when they went into Jericho, God had given some very specific instructions. And we tend to focus on the whole march around the city and then let the walls fall down and go straight up in and conquer it. And that's important. But the other part of the instructions that God had given them in attacking the city of Jericho was that everything was to be destroyed. And if you would like to test the theological knowledge of Walter and Brad Candy, the other part of the ministry team here, you can ask them about the morality and the rightness and wrongness of when God says go in and kill everybody. Let them have them explain that to you tonight. They're going to take questions tonight in the service if anybody asks that one. But that God sends the people of Israel and says destroy everything, destroy everybody. The stuff that can't be destroyed by fire is to belong exclusively to the treasury of the Lord. It's supposed to be put in the tabernacle and be God's stuff. That's where the problem comes in. That's where Achan was. These are the instructions. Jericho was smooth. It's a great win. It's an easy win. God levels the city. You got to figure that the army that's there is sitting there going, we had this nice wall and this wonderful plan. And we expected to have time while they built a siege ramp. It was not uncommon for sieges of cities to take anywhere from a year to 2 years. We see them even historically taking as long as 3 years. And in some legends, you see a city that is besieged for 10. And you still don't get in until you drop off a horse and leave. But this takes 7 days. And it's over. And so it's a very sudden, very surprising thing. All the people of Israel had to do was follow the commands that God had given them. And then we pick this up at Joshua chapter 1. The Israelites, however, were unfaithful regarding the thing. I said chapter 1, chapter 7. Regarding the thing set apart for destruction. Achan, son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took some of what was set apart, and the Lord's anger burned against the Israelites. That's the first verse. Realize, though, that at this point Joshua doesn't know what you know. as we go into the rest of this. Then Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is near Bethaven, east of Bethel, and told them, "Go up and scout the land." So the men went up and scouted Ai. After returning to Joshua, they reported to him, "Don't send all the people, but send about 2,000 or 3,000 men to attack Ai. Since the people of Ai are so few, don't wear out all our people up there." So about 3,000 men went up there, but they fled from the men of Ai. Now, I actually think that if we look back, I think I preached this sermon here where we talked about being careful not to be lazy. Don't make everybody go labor. Just find a few people to send them. And about the fact that in God's kingdom and in God's command, there's work enough for everybody. The answer is almost never going to be, well, let's just send a few. One of the things that we do is we cooperate as a Southern Baptist church with other Southern Baptist churches to send missionaries, but we can never reach the point that we say, well, we write a check, we send a few. We send 4,000 to go out and spread the gospel around the world. There's no reason for all of us to labor at spreading the gospel. Well, that's plumb nonsense. There's always work enough to do. But anyway, so they send them. But the men of Ai strike down about 36 of the 3,000 that go up. Chase them from outside the city gate to the quarry, striking them down on the descent. As a result, the people lost heart. Joshua tore his clothes and fell face down to the ground before the ark of the Lord until evening, as did the elders of Israel. They put dust on their heads, sign of mourning and weeping. "O Lord God," Joshua said, "why did you ever bring these people across the Jordan to hand us over to the Amorites for our destruction? If only we had been content to remain on the other side of the river. What can I say, Lord, now that Israel has turned its back and run from its enemies? When the Canaanites and all who live in the land hear about this, they'll surround us and wipe out our name from the earth. Then what will you do about your great name?" And then the Lord said to Joshua, "Stand up! Why have you fallen face down?" And this is where we're going to camp out for a moment. The Lord then goes on to tell Joshua that what has occurred is that because of Achan's sin, the people are guilty before the Lord their God, and it's because of his sin that they have been defeated. Except the Lord doesn't say, by the way, go find Achan and deal with him. Instead, he says the people of Israel have been unfaithful. And so Joshua has to go through the process because the sin of the one affected everybody. The sin that had infested itself into one person's life and heart affected everybody of the people of Israel. And that's what the Lord tells them to do. So then they have to go and they find and they seek out the truth. They don't just act on a rumor. They seek out the truth and they even get a confession. Achan says, "Yeah, I did it. Here's what I took. I took some gold, I took some silver, I took some really nice clothes. They're all hidden in my tent." And so the people of Israel execute God's justice in this case. It's worth considering that here is Achan, who by birth should be part of the people of Israel. He's part of the nation of Judah, or part of the tribe of Judah. He's removed from the people of Israel. You had Rahab, who we talked about last week, who was part of the people of the land. But the difference in the two is that Rahab is faithful and takes the Lord, the God of Israel, as the God to be praised, to be worshipped, and to be feared. And so she is put into the people of God. Achan, on the other hand, rejects God's commands. And so he's taken out. He's cut off from his people, which is what the law gave us as the curse. It gave us the instruction. After they root out the sin, then the Lord says, "Now take everybody up to Ai. They can spell it, they can go attack it. Send them out. Here's the plan. This is what I want you to do." And they utterly destroy Ai. In fact, the name of the city actually means ruin. And they make a ruin of it. And they destroy it completely. And then they move on and carry on with the conquest. And this spurs several other things that happen with the people of the land. And and such, but the key point is that Achan's sin, first of all, was not an isolated incident. Obviously, other people would have known, because the guy carried back a bunch of gold and silver out of the city that they destroyed. It's not like he had pockets, y'all. I mean, it's not small enough that it would fit in there anyway. But what do you do? Achan's the guy they're looking at. What do you got in the bag? Well, we stole some of his stuff. What do you got? Oh, I've got a basketball, and a volleyball, and a ping pong ball. No, you don't. What's a ping pong? Come on, man. His sin affected all of God's people. So as we think about that, and then because of that, the people then cried out, and we're going to fill in the blanks here in a minute. When the people cried out to God, God's answer was, get up off your face. Why are you down there praying and acting like this is my fault? The problem is not me. The problem is sin. And see, this is a problem that I think that we sometimes have as Christian people in our individual lives, as Christian people in our families, as churches. And then I think we have sometimes as a nation. You see people, you see this on social media all the time, pray that God will bless America. And I think that sometimes the Lord's answer to us as a nation is exactly the same as his answer to Joshua and the elders of Israel. Get up, get the sin out, and then come back and talk to me. So with this in mind, as we look at how this applies to us, when the power of God is absent from the work of God, then the people of God had better ask where they chose to disobey God. When the power of God, you ever notice those times that it seems like the power of God is absent? This is the God who parts the Red Sea. He parts the Jordan River. He knocks down the walls of Jericho flat. Later on, when you go the next book over into Judges, the idea of, oh, well, don't send everybody, actually comes back with the judge named Gideon that God sends into battle with 300 guys, not 3,000 guys, and their hands are full. They've got a lamp in one hand, a trumpet in the other, and they're supposed to go fight. Now, I remember in marching band, most of us tended to run away from the trumpet players, but still, the fact that 3,000 couldn't handle a small city like Ai shows that the power of God was absent from what they were doing. Is the power of God absent in your life? Not the power of your wits, the power of your abilities. Not the power of your talents, but the power of God. That which makes it more than what we as people are capable of. The power of God, that which gives you the ability to walk up to a stranger and look at them and say, I'd like to talk to you about something that's more important than anything else on your mind, and that is, will you spend an eternity in heaven or in hell? The power of God, that which makes it possible for you to say, I've grown up in nothing but small towns in the South all my life, but I'm going to get on a plane, I'm going to go halfway around the world and tell people about Jesus who don't even speak my language. The power of God that makes it possible for example, some missionaries that we support as a church family to go halfway around the world being music teachers from Pine Bluff, Arkansas to start with, and they go halfway around the world to take a language that doesn't even have the Bible available in it and help guide the people in that culture to translate the Bible so that they can understand it and read it. The power of God that makes those types of things possible. The power of God that helps you get up and say, one more day I can go and I can deal with this. One more day I can fight this. One more day I can pray that God heals me from my cancer. One more day I can grieve like those who have hope instead of like those who have no hope in the face of death. The power of God in our lives. The power of God in our church that helps us get along, that helps us carry out the mission that God has given us. The power of God that helps us to accomplish and to do those things which we would never be able to do even if we had all of the thoughts and all of the ideas that we could come up with. But without the power of God, we get nothing done. not anything that matters. We need the power of God. Sometimes the power of God is absent. The power of God is absent. When you get up in the day and there's no love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control to be had, because the power of God is absent in your life. You go to stand before people and the Spirit doesn't give you utterance because the power of God is absent in your life. When you pray, when you fundraise, when you do this, when you pass the offering plate, and yet the power of God is not there, it is not in reminding people, it does not show itself in God's blessing, the power of God is absent. And we tend to get despondent like the people of Israel do when the power of God is absent, especially when it's absent from the work of God. For the record, the power of God isn't necessarily guaranteed when you're doing the work of something other than that which is godly. In fact, I would suggest that God tends to stand against you. And there are times that we do things that aren't automatically the work of God. For example, mowing your yard is not necessarily the work of God. It is not, yes, pray that the mower works, please. Pray that mine works. That's not automatically the work of God. That's simply the things of life that we can do to the glory of God. But your mower not starting may not be the result of sin or the absence of the power of God. Typically, it's the absence of the power of EverStart. Or the absence of... I got one that'll spin, but it won't go vroom. I don't know what his problem is. I don't see it as a spiritual issue. I think it's a carburetor. We're talking about the work of God to carry the gospel to the nations, the work of God to make right relationships that have fallen apart, the power of God to help us overcome difficulties and sin in our life where we've gone wrong, where we've taken on addictions that we don't have, the power of God that makes our marriages be peaceful, that allows us to raise our children in the nurture, the admonition of the Lord that they can follow Jesus through their life. Power of God within the church that helps us to love one another in such a way that a lost and dying world filled with people who have no idea what's wrong, they just know something is, can look at us and go, they've got it right. Let me follow them. So that when they come, we can say, it's not us, it's Jesus. When the power of God is absent from the work of God, then the people of God, that's the right button, us, the people of God. Now Israel is not the church is not Israel, there's different things here, but I think the principle applies. The people of God. We spend a lot of time and energy, social media retweets, clicks, and shares on Facebook, lamenting the fact that the people of this world don't do things which are godly. But the absence of the power of God has nothing to do with anything Hollywood ever does. It has nothing to do with anybody Twitter shadow bans. It has nothing to do with who's in the House of Representatives and who is not in the House of Representatives. It has nothing to do with the Ninth Circuit, the Supreme Court, the local court, anything of the sort. Because the power of God has been present in the people of God in nations where the government is explicitly hostile to Christianity. It has nothing to do with the folks outside whether or not the power of God is present in the work of God. It has everything to do with us as the people of God. It's not the Democrats' fault. It's not the Republicans' fault. It's not the communists' fault. It's not the libertarians' fault. The question is, what have the people of God done or not done? So why it's important when July 4th rolls around and you will go to read in 2 Chronicles 7:14 about if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray. Understand that my people is not everybody that gets an American passport. It's everybody who claims Jesus as Lord. You can't fault the folks that aren't Christians for the fact that God brings judgment on the church. We have to look in the mirror. That's where the problem lies. The people of God. The power of God is absent from the work of God. Then the people of God had better ask where they chose. You don't accidentally get up one morning and decide to sin. You choose. Achan chose. We choose. You say, oh, you don't understand. It's just there's so many other things going on. We choose. We choose our priorities. We choose our daily schedules. Oh, no, I have to go to work. Yeah, I understand that. You choose your attitude about work. You choose how you carry yourself into work. You choose the life that you have that drives what kind of work that you need to have. Well, I got to have this big job that pays this six-digit salary so that, because I mean that's the only way I can afford the house and the brand new car and the this. You chose. If you chose 3,000 square feet, you chose the work that you have to do to pay for it. If you chose to make sure that you always have the iPhone next, if you choose that, then you're choosing the rest of it. Your life is not an accident. Now there are times that things happen to you, that other people harm you. And in those cases, you need to choose to come and ask for help from folks, ask for healing, pray that God helps. But most of us, our lives are driven by the choices that we make. You don't understand, I can't stay awake at church. I just go to sleep all on my own. Because you choose to stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning on Saturday night. It's just too hard to get there. You chose. How your Sunday morning goes is a Saturday night decision. Whether or not you have time tomorrow morning before you go to work to get up and read the Bible is a choice that you'll make tonight. Some of us can choose to get up at 4 in the morning to go do this or go do that. We can choose to stretch our days and stay awake for this, that, and the other. But then when it comes to what it is to follow after Christ, it's, oh, I just can't. I don't have a choice. I've got time to do this, and I've got time to, I just don't have a choice. We choose. As a church, we choose. We choose our priorities. We choose our decisions. We choose the way that we're going to be. We are not locked in to, well, this is just our habit. I mean, we choose our habits and then they shape us. But we can choose. We choose whether we're going to be on mission to carry the gospel around the world and carry the gospel across the street, or if we're going to be just one thing. We choose if we want an entertaining worship service or we want one that challenges us to walk closer with Christ. And we can drop little bits of entertainment into the midst of that. I know I'm not funny. I'm trying to be. I'm trying to make sure you're awake. We can choose. But oftentimes we don't choose, we just drift. Because we don't pay attention, which is what the people of Israel had done with Achan. He had people around him that could have seen him and should have seen him taking that which was dedicated to God and holding on to it and turning it into his own personal possession. And they should have held him accountable to it one-on-one until before it became a matter for the whole community to have to take him out and stone him. But they chose to let it go. People wonder sometimes why we don't do church discipline on, why don't we call somebody up here and I'll pick on Brad, since he was picking on me. Why don't we throw him out of church for not being certain where Romans was this morning? Well, we don't do that because can you show me at any point where his small group Bible study went over the books of the New Testament such that he should have known? where one of his accountability partners, one of the people who was building into his life, helping to disciple him to walk with Jesus, taught him that at all. You see, we tend to do church discipline when we think about it. We do it like it had to happen with Achan. We ignore it, we ignore it, we ignore it, and then all of a sudden it's too big of a deal to ignore anymore, and all that's left is to take somebody in, throw them out and stone them. Now, the government won't let us stone them these days, but we'll throw them out and ignore them and shun them in the harvest fields. Excuse me, bye, right? Wrong way. Edwards. Y'all know what, most of y'all know what I'm talking about. We choose to look the other way, to not build lives of accountability to one another, to not build disciples, and then we choose the end result of that, which is not the occasional getting, flipping in your Bible going, this one's laid out different than the one I read, so where is this? Which happens to anybody that owns more than 2 Bibles. Instead, we just kind of look over and go, well, oops. What are we going to do now? We choose. You better ask where we chose to disobey God. When the power of God is absent from the work of God, then the people of God had better ask where they chose to disobey God. We tend to want to think that most of our life can be lived in neutral, that we can kind of drift. But every day we're either actively obedient to the call and the command of the Lord our God, or we're actively disobedient to the call and the command of the Lord our God. Now sometimes we're actively disobedient because we decide that we're tired and we need a rest, and we don't trust that God will provide that for us. So, oh no, I had to take a break. There's times people need a break. Sunday school teachers need a break. Music leaders need a break. Carlos' fingers got to cool off in between the end of the morning service and choir practice. But we have to trust that God is going to bring those, that as we walk in active obedience of what God has told us to do, that He knows what our capacity is. We would trust our personal trainers. We're trying to get fit to look at us and say, no, you can give it 2 more minutes on the treadmill. I know you've got it in you. We let them challenge us and say, get through it. We would say, no, I'm done. I'm going to take a rest. We would realize that the answer would be, well, you're not going to get any kind of results. You're not going to get anywhere with that. You go to school, you trust that the teacher that pushes you and says, no, you can do this much more. We trust that teacher to push and to realize that we're not going to get what we expect to get if we don't try a little bit more. The same thing is true if you play a sport and the coach does it, you play an instrument and your instructor tells you that, and the band director says, oh no, we're running through the show one more time. And you go, no. When a drill instructor said to you in basic training, oh, you guys are tired? Good, 5 more miles. That'll take care of it. You know what you found? You found that you could. But oftentimes we disobey God, and our excuse is that we're tired. And really the answer is that we're lazy. We want to quit. We want to be done. Because we don't see the next thing, and it's because we don't trust that God has an answer for that. But we're either living in active obedience or active disobedience. The people of Israel thought that they could just drift on along. Oh, we know what this is. We got this. We don't have to inquire of the Lord. We don't have to seek the Lord. We got it. No problem. But instead, what they were was disobedient. What about us? You're either actively obeying God or you're actively disobeying. One of those things is where you are. There is no life in neutral. There is no point at which you can heave to, drop anchor, and just wait it out for a day or two. You are always in motion. Active, either obedience or disobedience. And the power of God is absent in the work of God. The people of God had better ask where they chose to disobey God. So what do we do about this? What is the expectation? That should actually be plural. Expectations. Sometimes I type. First of all, the expectation is this. There should be time in your life that you actively ask God to reveal sin in your life, that you can root it out and get rid of it. And sometimes there are things in your life that are there because they're long-standing habits. They're there because a long time ago you thought, oh, well, there's no problem with this. There's nothing wrong with this. But as you walk closer to Jesus, you should realize, you know, maybe I need to re-examine this habit. Never thought about before whether or not playing this video game is sinful or not. But now that I think about it, it glorifies and dramatizes and encourages me to take an attitude towards human life that treats it as if it's no big deal. Let me set that aside. Oh, this is my favorite movie from when I was a kid, and I want to watch it again. And then you get about 15 minutes in and you go, whoa. You know, my favorite movie had some bad things in it. And you realize that back then, Mom and Dad were making all those illegal copies off of stuff when it was edited for television. You never saw 20 minutes of that film. It's a lot more wicked than you realized. Set it aside. Actively ask God to reveal the sin in your life. You know, this is the way I am. This is the way I treat my husband because, well, that's the way Mom always treated Dad. And yet, as I pray about it, I don't see how it lines up properly with Ephesians chapter 5. This is the way I treat my wife because I'm a man and I'm the man of the house and this is who I'm supposed to be. Because after all, this is the way Dad was. This is the way all the famous, father knows best. Grew up watching that show, I know best. And yet somehow it doesn't line up with husbands love your wives as Christ loved the church. It doesn't line up with fathers. Do not exasperate your children to wrath, but raise them in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. This is the way all 13-year-olds act towards their mom and dad. I don't care about this, about that. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. It's not a matter of whether your parents are right. It's a matter of what the Word of God has said. We need to pray that God will show us and reveal to us. When we talk about the idea, we glance through the choices that we make. We say, well, you know, I've always chosen this. Are you telling me, preacher, that it's wrong to live in a big house? No, but I'm telling you, you should pray about it. How has God provided that? How does that enable your obedience? Maybe it was obedient to have it then, and it'd be obedient now to sell it and go live in those tiny houses they make a big deal about on TV all the time. Some people want to live in a camper. I mean, that just makes them happy. Well, I pray that God would root out the sin in our lives. I pray that God would root out the sin in our church. Some of our habits may not be as God-honoring as we think they are. Some of our opinions, some of our feelings about how this is done or how that's done, it's stuff that we grew up with. But is it clearly in Scripture? Is it truly a command of God? We'll root them out, cast them aside. Ask God for His forgiveness that we could go forward. And as we look to one another, I'll start asking questions about how can we choose to encourage each other to good deeds. Not how we can choose it. We all start to think this way. This is where everybody's mind jumps when we start talking about being accountable to one another in small groups. I don't want these people telling me what's wrong with my life. Trust me, I got plenty of people who can tell me what's wrong with my life. It's not where it starts. It's not even the purpose The purpose is not that Walter and I would start to hold each other accountable so that I can watch Walter and make him a list. Walter, here's all the things I've seen wrong with you this week. Ooh, I got my little notebook here. There's this, and there's this, and there's this. Instead, what accountability is really about is, Walter, I'm praying for you in your marriage today. Is there any extra way I can pray for you? Not that I would point out to him that what's wrong, but that I would pray that God would work in his life, encourage him in the positive things. And that if the Lord reveals to him, actually, you can pray for me in this. God's shown me I need to work on this in my marriage. All right, I'll pray for you in that. Not that I'll point out what's wrong. He doesn't need that any more than I do. But rather that I can say to him, I'll be praying for you in that. Here's how the Lord has shown me that I'm not treating Ann right. I need you to pray for me with this. And then the next week he can look at me and say, hey, I've been praying for this for you this week. How's that going? Most of us are afraid of that and we won't do it. Certainly won't do it in our Sunday school classes, which is where we claim that we're in a small group of community with people to encourage us and challenge us. Well, let your Sunday school teacher look you dead in the eye and say, I need you to answer for how your marriage is this week in your Sunday school class, and most of you would find a new Sunday school teacher. We hit Robert up to ask the junior high boys some very serious questions about the challenges that they face in this world that tries to bombard them with lust and bombard them with sexual entrapment these days. A lot of us parents of junior high boys would be going, I'm not sure I want Robert talking about that in Sunday school. But if our Sunday school class doesn't do it, and us parents don't do it, where does it get done? By the way, no, I'm not giving Robert permission to do that. The challenge there is parents of junior high boys, if you don't want Robert to do it, you need to do it. And if everybody feels real awkward when I bring up even a mention of stuff like that in church, you really need to make sure that you do it at home. Because at some point we've got to be confronted with the fact that the world tries to entrap us through our passions and through where we're easily entangled. Because if you can trip up a 13, 14-year-old boy on lust at 13 and 14, it will dominate and trouble his life until he is 70. Or until he repents and roots it out. It'll wreck his marriage when he's 50, because he'll fall back into it if the Spirit of God doesn't work in his life and root it out. And so if we don't start then, when do we start? Do we wait until he's gone through his third divorce for cheating on his wife, and then we finally look at it and say, we don't think that you should stay here in this church, let's just throw you out? Do we wait? We need to choose, as God's people, to find ways to strengthen each other, to start with the small points in life, to grow properly, to follow after Christ. What do we expect? What does God expect of us to do about this? To root the sin out of our lives and to make sure that we make good ground to grow disciples of Christ from. Whatever it takes. Whatever it is, those are just examples. Those are not specifics. Those are not the only ways that applies. Lust and adultery hits women too. Don't think of, it's all those boys who are nothing but trouble. It's all around. Temptation is everywhere, and we are there to stand against it, not as an onward Christian soldier, but as soldiers together. To stand for one another. Ask God to reveal those things in your life that pull you away from Him. Root them out. Get rid of not only the sin, but the fruit of it in your life. Pray that we will have the courage to do it as a church, and we will see the power of God enable us to do His work as the people of God. Let's pray together. Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your love, your grace, and your mercy. I pray, Lord God, that you will help us as we strive to follow you.
It's in Jesus' name.